Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
End the war by Thanksgiving, Trump tells Zelensky. But to whom shall we give thanks? Who will be doing the giving and who is going to be the turkey? Not that any of it is ever going to happen, at least if the European Union leaders and Keir Starmer, the Harry Worth of British politics, have anything to do with it. Trump had a 28-point plan. The Europeans have got a 24-point plan, but you could sum it up in one. This war must continue. And thanks to a regrettable lapse by Elon Musk, only for an hour or two, you now know that those sexy IDF women soldiers that you've been chatting up over the last period were actually goat farmers from Nigeria, if they were not people in the bot farms in India. And well, there's so much coming up, and the guests are so good. I'll just say, stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Now, I don't know much about Thanksgiving. What I do know about it is I wouldn't be celebrating it, as it's asking God to bless and to give thanks to God for the wholesale theft of an entire subcontinent, which led ineluctably to the mass extermination of the people who were already living there, before supplementing the population with millions of black African slaves brought in chains across the Middle Passage. But it's an American thing. What I do know about Thanksgiving is it's on Thursday, and that is a tight deadline indeed that Donald Trump has given Volodymyr Zelensky, or appeared to give him. With Trump, you must cancel my last announcement. With Trump, it will depend upon who sat upon him last, like that famous sofa in Oscar Wilde's aphorism. The deadline of Thursday set complete panic in the ranks of the Zelensky gang in Kiev. After all, two of his closest allies and most important people in Kiev, in government circles, have literally fled to Israel. Where else are they going to flee? They're accused of being thieves. They have the right to go to Israel because they're Jewish, so they've gone, and they're never coming back. And others are in other capitals and in other countries. And that's because of the massive corruption scandal which our friend Larry Johnson, the former CIA analyst, estimates at a $45 billion theft, making it easily the greatest theft ever recorded in human history. 45 billion. I want you to concentrate on the word billion. Try this to help you concentrate. If you turned the clock back 1,000,000 minutes, you'd reach 2023. If you turned the clock back 1 billion minutes, you'd reach the Roman Empire. That's right. That's the difference between 1,000,000 and 1 billion. 2023 and the Roman Empire. Because people are so used to hearing the word billion, they have entirely lost, if they ever had, any sense of the gargantuan scale of $1 billion. So try $45 billion. That was funneled in by your government, if you're in the United States, in Britain or France or Germany or any European Union government, and many others outside of the European Union. Your government funneled $45 billion that were stolen by Zelensky, his family, and his closest clique associates. No wonder he demanded from President Trump a clause in the Trump 28-point peace plan that granted amnesty to everyone involved in the war. Amnesty or not, Zelensky ain't going to get away with this level of theft. Someone, somewhere, is probably even now contemplating how they're going to hold him accountable, how they're going to recover $45 billion in grand larceny, how they're going to get it back, at least to Ukraine, if not to the other countries whose money it actually was. But I digress. The 28-point plan by Donald Trump, to be agreed by Thursday, is the basis for a peace agreement, no doubt. Kellogg, General Kellogg, the stooge of the regime in Kiev, has declared it so. Trump has declared it so. Vance, who's keenest of all, has declared it so. Rubio, who's not remotely keen, has declared it so. And most importantly, the Russian government, President Vladimir Putin, has also said that it is the basis for a settlement. So it could all be over by Thanksgiving, or at least be over by Christmas, or maybe the Orthodox Christmas, or I don't know, maybe Easter. But it should now be coming to an end, and could now be coming to an end. A conflict that has cost the lives of well over 1 million people. 1 million Ukrainians alone. The dispersal of 9 million Ukrainians who've left their country, are living near you, are living on you, and may never leave you, have been sent spilling around the Western world, looking for a place to avoid being drafted from. And who can blame them? One sees the pictures, the videos of the brutal press ganging of young men and very old men, and now also women in Ukraine, drafted to go to the front, perchance to die within a week, to defend the robbing barons of the Kiev dictatorship, whose democratic legitimacy is gone with the wind. But the cost to Ukraine of this, which has of course been the major loser, is not just measurable in blood, or even blood and treasure. It must be measurable in land. Every single day that a peaceful settlement of this conflict is delayed, the Russian armed forces are helping themselves to a bigger and bigger part of Ukraine. As my friend Chaybowes always puts it, Ukraine will be smaller tomorrow than it was today. And that is true every single day. And now, major cities, Pavlovsk, the country towns, villages, cities, major infrastructure are either being destroyed or they are being taken. And Kupiansk, the town I told you about right at the beginning of the conflict, when I said who wants to send their son to die, to decide which side of a line Kupiansk will lie on when it has lain in 4 different countries in the last 100 years. Well, I can now tell you that Kupiansk will lie in Russia. And much else besides, if this peace deal isn't honored, isn't implemented, either by Thanksgiving or at least, one hopes, by Christmas. And so any sane person would have already concluded that now is the time to finish this thing by negotiation before more lives are lost, before more treasure is burned, before more land is lost, and, well, frankly, before the European economies in particular are simply no longer able to even make the promises that they are currently making but cannot keep. Well, that's what a sane person would think. But our leaders are not sane. Starmer ain't sane. Macron is roaming around Paris like Caligula. Merz, true to his great-grandfather and his service in the Nazi inner circle, Hitler's inner circle, yes, the Reich Chancellor in Berlin now is the grandson of one of Hitler's inner circle. You really couldn't make it up. If that patch of hair on the middle of his rather receding hairline were placed underneath his powerful nose, I think you'd get the picture very clearly. Merz, Macron, Starmer. What's the other fella in Finland? Stubbs. Stubbs. We've got a Rutte and we've got a Stubbs in this picture too. These people are not sane. These are not well men. They can't be, because they are watching their political fortunes disappear down the drain as fast as they are pouring their country's hard-earned and much-needed cash into. They formed an alternative plan. As you'd expect, their alternative plan is utterly ridiculous. I mean, so ridiculous, you'll laugh out loud. Trump's plan rules out NATO membership forever for Ukraine. The European leaders' counter plan is that Ukraine must be free to join NATO anytime it likes. Trump's plan says cut the Ukrainian armed forces to a figure 8 times greater than the armed forces of the United Kingdom. Bad enough. But the European leaders' plan is no cap on the Ukrainian armed forces at all. Trump's plan excludes foreign armies entering Ukraine. The European leaders demand to be allowed to send their sons at your expense indefinitely to be an occupation force in Ukraine. I could go on, but we've got expert guests that will go on and give us chapter and verse. But put it this way: the European peace plan is a war plan. If any line of it is incorporated, it will render null and void Putin's declaration that Trump's plan might be the basis for a settlement. So be sure that your leader's plan is for you to go on in fuel poverty, paying 4 times at least the bill for electricity and gas than you were before this conflict broke out in its current form almost 4 years ago. Be sure your leaders are planning to send your sons to a war for which side of a line Kupiansk will reside for the next 100 years. Be sure that your leaders intend for the large-scale theft of your resources to continue, for no justice to be visited on the thieves of the century. It is your leaders' plan that a war will continue to rage in Europe, pregnant with the possibility of being the harbinger of World War III. That's your leaders' peace plan. There they are on the screen behind me. They couldn't muster 20% approval between them, 10 and 9 is their current public approval rating, but they are spending your country's money and risking your people's blood and perpetual war in Europe. And we have, I've said this before, the now grotesquely bizarre situation that a right-wing Republican president of the United States is trying to stop a European war, while the milquetoast couldn't punch their way out of a wet paper bag social and Christian Democrats in Europe and in the United Kingdom who are demanding that the war must continue and that you must continue to pay for it. Who will win? I can't predict. Rubio just said he's met Ukraine. It was a great meeting, and he's going to change some of President Trump's plans accordingly. Whether President Trump knows that and approves it or not, I suppose we'll have to wait on Truth Social to discover. But anything that Rubio changes at the behest of the Ukrainians makes it far less likely that the Russians will accept it. And why should they? It's not the losers of a war who dictate the terms of its ending. It is the winners of a war who do so. And who, in their right mind, will now deny that Russia has won the war in Ukraine? I've only time to deal with a couple of other points. First one was what I said in the introduction. What a stroke of luck, or what a blunder, take your pick, when Elon Musk said he'd now publish the origin of Twitter accounts. Didn't last long, but my goodness, people are quick at the old screenshotting. Turns out the US government, Department of Homeland Security, has its Twitter account started in Israel and operated from Israel. What's that about? Turns out that Hate Not Hope, the campaign group that worked hard to get me out of the British Parliament, operates its Twitter account from the United States of America. Turns out, like that Talk Sport advert, you remember? You think you're talking to a buxom blonde beauty in the Ukraine and proposing marriage, but you're actually talking to a 20-stone boilermaker in Middlesbrough. Turns out that all these winsome, blonde, blue-eyed Israeli women soldiers that you may very well have been arguing with if you weren't lusting over are actually Nigerians and Indians. It turns out that almost all of the bots operated by Israel are operating from India and Nigeria. I don't know what it is about India and Nigeria that makes them so, well, conducive to a job scamming. I myself used to regularly get letters from a Nigerian prince. You know me, good man, he called himself. And if only I would send him my bank account details, he'd kindly deposit several £1,000,000 for no reason in said account. Well, it turns out that Nigeria and India, I don't know what other economy is going on there, but my God, there's a whole lot of tweeting going on under false colours, false pretenses in both of those countries. I did have one other thing to say, but I've run out of time. Stay tuned. We have got the European expert on the European counter peace plan, Professor Glenn Diesen. He's up right next. Stay tuned.
the airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So here's the poll tonight. Will Zelensky accept the Trump peace plan? Yes or no. You can vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, or on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. And if you are watching on the YouTube stream, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to give a thumbs up to the show. You can also vote on my Patreon page if you are one of the vanguard, the creme de la creme, who follow me on patreon.com/George Galloway. Wow, 25,000 nearly have voted already on this poll. And actually, it's quite a close run thing, closer than you would have imagined. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 0044203 966 2625. Now, the master of European politics, indeed global politics, but a man who knows European politics intimately, is Professor Glenn Diesen, professor at the University of Southeastern Norway and editor at Russia in Global Affairs. I'm glad to say, although he's in a great deal of demand right now, as you could imagine, Professor Glenn Diesen joins me now. Wonderful to see you again, Professor. The European counter-offer is laughable, isn't it? And if you agree, tell us in which ways.
Well, first, thank you for that very kind introduction. No, I think laughable is a good description. Delusional is one as well. And it consists of 24 points, if I'm not mistaken. And, well, a quick summary would be, of course, going back to the ceasefire, which is no need for political settlement, just freeze it where it is. NATO membership should still be on the menu. There will be no discussion of territory unless Ukraine agrees to it. There will be, of course, very powerful security guarantees, and why not have financial compensation that Russia has to pay Ukraine. So what they're asking in this peace deal is essentially Russia's capitulation, and it is quite extraordinary because Russia went to war to prevent NATO expanding into Ukraine. Then, after much suffering, Russia has now effectively won the war. Yet the Europeans thinks it's reasonable to demand that the peace agreement towards the end of the Russian victory is that, yes, NATO anchors itself in Ukraine. It doesn't really make much sense at all. And like you just said before the break, that usually it's the victorious side that gets to dictate the terms. Yet here we have the whole thing turned on its head. And I tried to make sense of it. And when you listen to the arguments of these European leaders, what they're referring to is that they are morally right. They might not have won the war, but morally they are on the right side. That is, they keep saying Russia is allegedly the aggressor, Ukraine is the victim. Therefore, it's only fair that they get to dictate the terms. You know, you can. I would put some question marks around Russia simply being an aggressor, given that all the evidence has pretty much come in, and we know that NATO triggered this war back in 2014. But even if it wasn't, this is a very strange worldview where you get to dictate the terms, even if you lose. It doesn't really make any sense at all.
Well, my football teams very, very frequently win moral victories, but the victories are never chalked up on the boards and we don't get to collect any trophies. Moral victories, even if they are moral victories, are meaningless at the end of the day. And to consider for 1 minute that NATO is the moral actor in this or any other theatre of operations is a bit of a stretch. But I want to put this to you, Professor. Do they really mean it? I mean, you say you listen to them. I'm glad that you do, so that we don't have to. But when they're putting forward this alternative plan, which is no plan for peace at all, do they mean it, or are they simply seeking to wreck Trump's plan?
No, they're seeking to wreck Trump's plan, and that's pretty much a certainty. That is, they did criticize the plan to a great extent, and of course there's always room for criticism, but it's worth noting that the Europeans haven't forwarded any serious plan of their own. Indeed, whenever they talk about peace, it's in terms of sending more weapons, escalating the sanctions, essentially find a way of breaking Russia. This is the path to peace. This is why the Chinese were also so surprised when the Europeans came to them and tried to ask them to help them end the war. And, how? Yeah, well, we have to break Russia. This is the only solution. So they're not looking for peace. They're looking for defeating the Russians. So also, the Europeans aren't talking to the Russians. They want a seat at the table, but they can't pick up a phone. They don't call the Russians. Why can't they speak to Putin on their own? The whole idea is that they can't talk to Putin without Zelensky in the room. It's quite absurd. This is a war about the European security architecture breaking down. There's no reason why they can't speak to the Russians. And so the main objective, given that Europeans do not want peace, is then the only pathway forward is defeating Russia. And if you want to do this, you have to pull the United States into the war, deeper into the war. They're already quite involved. But to do so, the Europeans have to sell the notion that they want peace and that it's the Russians who don't want it. So, in other words, try to direct the fury and frustration of Trump towards the Russians to pressure them into a peace deal, which is why they come up with this preposterous idea like a unconditional ceasefire. The only reason why anyone would now consider restoring Ukraine's neutrality, that is ending NATO expansion and these territorial concessions, is exactly because Russia's winning. If you end the war, why would the Europeans want to make any concessions at all? They would only escalate, intensify the military-industrial production, ship all long-range missiles they can into Ukraine, and then simply buy more time, another Minsk agreement, to prepare for continuing the war. Unconditional ceasefire has the simple aim of prolonging the war, and to do so, the main objective is to pull America into the fight.
Well, let's turn to that, Professor. I said earlier that Rubio said that he met, I think, in Geneva today with the Ukrainian and other European leaders, and that he intends to change some aspects of the plan. I make the point that any change made at the behest of Ukraine and the European leaders is a change making less likely that the Trump plan will ever come to fruition, either by Thanksgiving or by not this Christmas, but the next Christmas. So the question is, will it work for the Europeans? Will they successfully derail Trump's intentions, which may or may not be good intentions? We'll come to that next. But will they succeed, or will Trump hang tough?
Well, it's. I think this can go either way at this point. I'm a bit skeptical to what extent the Europeans will be successful, because I think that one of the reasons why Trump is rushing this thing through is to neutralize the European leaders, because they are it's very open and transparent that they are looking to sabotage what he wants to do. And but on the other hand, in the United States, you have a lot of hawks as well who are not on board with this deal, who would like to also cooperate with the Europeans to derail the whole thing. Indeed, there's been some reports that many people close to Trump's team wasn't aware of this 28-point peace plan at all. So I think he has a lot of hawks at home, which he has to address as well. He has to deal with the Europeans who are determined to just keep this war going. And of course, Zelensky himself, who has a lot of personal losses risking if the war comes to an end. He could be threatened. He's already been threatened if he dares to end the war along these lines. So no, I think there's many reasons why this could go wrong. But again, if they make changes in favor of what the Europeans want, and the Europeans want to derail it, how will that affect the Russians? Again, the Russians have not accepted this deal. They said, yes, this is a good, they suggested this could be a good point of departure to start negotiations. So it's not a done deal. It's a draft somewhere we can all start, which is why it's somewhat ambiguous. It's open to interpretation. But the idea that the Russians would allow hundreds of billions of their dollars to be used to rebuild Ukraine, to hand over to the Ukrainians, this isn't going to happen. But you can at least start there. You can talk. You can find some middle ground. Perhaps some of this money could then be devoted to rebuilding the destruction on the Russian sides of the front line, and in cooperation with the Americans, for example. There's some middle ground you can find, but as it stands, this deal, even the Russians aren't that happy. But it's good enough to start to talk, to sit down and have a serious format. But whatever the Europeans succeed in, it's going to get Trump further away from this goal of his.
So let's turn to the 28 points. You'll be more deeply familiar with them than me. I've, of course, read them, and some leap from the page as being non-starters. The substitution of membership of NATO to security guarantees, which are effectively Article 5 guarantees, which automatically bring war and the involvement in the war of the US and the European powers, the frozen money, which you've just referred to, hundreds of billions. You may not have heard me explain what billions mean earlier in the show. If you turn the clock back a million seconds, a million minutes, it'll take you to 2023. If you turn the clock a billion minutes, it will take you back to the Roman Empire. So begin to imagine what hundreds of billions of your money that they have frozen, that they intend to steal in the 28-point plan. Perfectly ridiculous in my view. The other points struck me again, leaping off the page, as actually quite creative. The Ukrainians would not be required to formally recognize their former territories now in Russia. That's quite creative. Other countries could and would recognize those territories, including the United States, I'm sure, but Ukraine would not be forced to do so. and so could continue notionally to imagine that one day Kupiansk would change sides of the line once again. Other creative aspects where, well, you can regard it as Russia renting these lands that they have now liberated, perhaps in perpetuity. And you could then haggle on what the rent would be, a peppercorn or $1 or $100. These are quite, I thought, quite creative potential solutions brought forward by Trump. But what's your take on the 28 points?
Well, it has a lot of flaws into it. Again, any renting, I don't see necessarily. No, I don't see the Russians going along with this. But also the troop levels in Ukraine. Again, the main fear of Russia, if you want to know what they're looking for, the main fear they have is that the peace deal will simply be a temporary ceasefire before we restart the hostilities. Again, there's a reason behind this. The first time we toppled the government in Ukraine was back in 2004 during the Rose Revolution. They did it again in 2014. Pretty much every deal has either been sabotaged or betrayed if it has been agreed upon. So what they really fear the most is another Minsk agreement, where we simply buy some time to rearm Ukraine. That's why, for example, freezing the Ukrainian army at 600,000 soldiers, it sounds like a lot. I'm not sure if the Russians would accept having this big threat there. And also, the whole idea of giving some security guarantees and storing a lot of long-range weapons in Poland or next to the Ukrainian borders, we can be shipped in if Russia does anything wrong. All of this is premised on the notion that NATO is somehow a neutral party, not a direct participant in this war. This is a proxy war. Even Marco Rubio, Boris Johnson, they recognize this as a proxy war. So why would the Russians accept this? It would allow NATO to essentially have keep in place a Ukrainian proxy army, which they can trigger at any time if in the future, and most likely there will be some tensions, if there will be any future problems, they can then activate this massive Ukrainian proxy and pump in all these long-range missiles and then say, oh, it's the Ukrainians who are bombing Moscow, it's not us. So I think there's a lot of flaws. Otherwise, some of them were interesting. For example, Russia should be invited back into the G8. I can't remember Russia ever asking to be allowed into the G8 again. But it looks as if this is part of the thinking in Washington, though, that they would like to see bringing the whole point of a peace would be to bring Russia to our side of the ledger. That is, instead of pushing it too far towards China, it should be allowed to integrate more towards the West. And I know there's been a lot of mockery around this, but I actually think it's a good idea which allows Russia to diversify its foreign partners. It can have a foot in bricks and still sit around the table with the Western countries. But again, a lot of this, if this is the objective, then yes, fine and well, but it's not something that's going to entice the Russians to give up anything, because they couldn't care less, I think, about the G8.
Yeah, it doesn't butter all that many parsnips being invited to the G8 when you look at the G8 and their really rather parlous economic performance and prospects. But the potential 600,000 strong army, which is 8 times larger than the entire British armed forces, we're being told by, not just by the European leaders, by the way, but by the well-known British nationalist leader, Nigel Farage, is up in arms at this outrageous demand that Ukraine should only have an army 8 times bigger than the entire British armed forces. This is going to be crucial, isn't it? Because, as you say, and we both have been in Russia comparatively recently, the Russians' biggest fear is that they have to do all this all over again. And if you're going to obviate or negate that fear, well, you've got to have a Ukrainian armed force that is simply too small and armed too poorly to be able to force Russia to do all this again.
No, exactly. And again, the whole thing goes back to the question, what caused this war? Because the whole logic of the Europeans, including then Farage, would be that Ukraine needs a powerful army to deter Russia from invading again. But again, there's a security competition at play here. It's worth noting that before 2014, no one in Moscow was talking about using military force against Ukraine. There was no territorial claims against Ukraine. This started in February of 2022, when NATO toppled the government in Ukraine to pull it into the NATO orbit. We already know this from the New York Times, that the day after the coup, the US and British installed a new intelligence chief in Ukraine, and the CIA and MI6 started up cooperating on the first day, before the Russians had taken Crimea or responded in any way. And the purpose of this was to use Ukraine as a tool, as a proxy against Russia. This is even confirmed by other papers, like the Washington Post, that the Americans had to rebuild the intelligence services from scratch in Ukraine because the previous ones used to be quite sympathetic and favorable to Russia. They were indeed, Russia were the main partner, and they had to convert Ukraine into an enemy. So this is the idea that Russia is hell-bent on invading and absorbing Ukraine. This is a fallacy. This was a reaction to a NATO offensive. That is, NATO triggered this in 2014. This is just the reality of it. So the whole problem with this argument that Ukraine should have this massive, powerful army is this is essentially going to be another instrument of NATO to go after Ukraine. So no, I think, of course, after going through such a painful war, I can understand why it seems very unfair to Ukraine that they won't have a big army to deter. But this is again going to be a humiliating peace, because it was very reckless war, unnecessary war. So I admit that it's going to be very humiliating, but this is the best, I think, the best option. There are no other options on the table. Indeed, the whole point is, when you lose the war, you don't get to dictate the terms, and they have lost the war. Indeed, even the biggest warmongers in Europe, now gung-ho on war, have premised the idea of a victory based on the US selling weapons it doesn't have to the Europeans who don't have the money to pay for it, so they can send it to Ukraine, which doesn't have the manpower to use them. It's just a horrible plan all over, and it's a military collapse, it's an economic failure, there's a lack of international support. Everything that can go wrong is going wrong now. So this is not the time to set up this ridiculous delusional demands.
Now, I know as a distinguished academic, you don't like to take a guess or even to speculate necessarily. But if I tell you my speculation is that this is not going to work and that the war will continue, will you show me your speculation?
Yeah, well, I assume, it's hard to look into my crystal ball and make a clear prediction, because I guess there's too many unknown variables which can play in here. But I assume that Zelensky and, he will sign up for it on principle, something to discuss, just to delay Trump's pressure tactics, because if he just rejects it outright, he might risk the US pulling support, everything from logistics to more weapons and intelligence, which they require to continue fighting the Russians. So he will have to give the image of wanting to go along with this, but then he will look for a way of making it seem as if the Russians aren't playing ball. I don't think it's going to work well, but it's going to be a delaying tactic, and during this time I think Trump will start to lose patience, but also the Russians will continue to make great advancements. And I think I don't see a political settlement yet. I think things has to get much worse on the battlefield before we can get a political deal, because Well, what the Russians are asking for, though, is a big ask. This is a very humiliating defeat for the Ukrainians. So, but again, they have lost, and but if they lose further, I think this is what's going to build up the pressure which is required to give in. But if you saw the latest speech by Zelensky, where he said that this was the major dilemma: either they hold on to their dignity by rejecting this, or they go along with it. Or if they reject the deal, then of course they're gonna lose the American support. So it's a very difficult spot they're in. So I think it's gonna try to find a middle way. But ultimately, I think the war will continue to go on, and the Russians will continue to increase the very rapid advancements they're now making. And at some point, something will break, and then a much worse deal will come on the table, which Zelensky will have to sign.
And General Winter
just as a
has
final
just
comment,
arrived
this is why,
on the battlefield.
Yeah. Well, it's the people who, I think it's no doubt anymore that the people who have the worst enemies of Ukraine have really been the people who has been portraying themselves as the friends of Ukraine, who has been for the past 11 years now rejecting any peace, always escalated and ignored all of the suffering which is happening there on the front. I think, it's, as I said, every day the deal will get much, much worse. And it's, I don't know, from my perspective, this, again, on this I agree with Trump. This deal, war never had to happen. It was a massive mistake, and the Europeans will eventually pay a lot for it as well.
Professor Glenn Diesen, as always, a tour de force. Thank you very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Here's the phone numbers. Again, in the US and Canada, toll free, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number, 0044 203 966 2625. Hit the phones, Jack and Jacqueline. I'll be right back after a short break. Stay tuned. On the line is a legend. It's May in Oklahoma. On you go, May.
I know that when you started out in life, you probably were an outcast. And because of that, you love you love the outcast and you love the downtrodden. When I first started listening to you, you actually said you were embarrassed to have to ask for money. And I told you at that time that you didn't need to be, because you are worth your salt. Now you have MOATS TV, and I hope you have no shame asking for money to support, because I believe you're finally coming into your own and understanding how very, very important you are to many, many people all over the world, millions, I'm sure. And you also ask not only for their support, for their understanding, and you help motivate us to take action. I know you motivate me. And now you're being recognized all over the world. And I want you to remember, on those days when you just feel like you don't know how you can do it anymore, because we all feel that way. We see the pictures, we see the videos, we hear the news reports. You know, we Americans hear about shootings, and we all just despair sometimes. But I want you on those days to remember, number one, how far you've come from your beginnings. And number two, how far you brought other people along with you, because you are bringing other people along with you. And you
that's the most important thing, May. I have to stop you. You're going to make me cry. But the most important thing is the people I'm bringing with me.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, get voting. It's a massive poll already. Will Zelensky accept the Trump peace plan? And it's a little bit closer than you would think. Let's talk with Tom in New York on Mamdani and Trump. It was a remarkable pas de deux in the Oval Office between the jihadist and the fascist. Tom, how did it look from your point of view?
George, first of all, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Thank God you and Gayatri are out of detainment. It was with regards to, you're welcome. With regards to President Trump and Mayor-elect Mamdani, it was kind of surreal. I was expecting a more combative meeting. However, I am encouraged that the meeting went well, at least publicly. However, certain realities need to be considered. In 2018, there were 37,000 NYPD officers. There are now 34,000 in 2025. However, 5,000 are eligible for retirement between now and the end of 2025. Certain cities such as Nashville and states such as Florida have been aggressively recruiting NYPD officers for years with bonuses, moving expenses, etc. According to a November 8th New York Daily News report, the Houston Police Department and ICE, Immigration's Customs Enforcement, are also aggressively recruiting NYPD officers. During the campaign, Mr. Mamdani campaigned on, quote, defund the police, which I think is a foolish and dangerous idea. You can't blame NYPD officers for leaving the work where they're wanted in states like Florida and possibly Houston and ICE. It's going to be very difficult to work in a place where you're not really wanted. Also, long-term demographics are not on the side. So, for example, in the most recent NYPD class, there were about 2,500 cadets out of 3,000 needed to refill the ranks. And New York City's been through a tough time over the past few years. I'll give you a few examples. A woman from my church was a housekeeper in Manhattan. She was waiting for the train to go back to Queens. Unfortunately, she was pushed onto the subway tracks, and with only a few seconds to spare, two good Samaritans pulled her off the subway tracks. She had some broken bones in her back, but thankfully survived. I've also spoken doing tech support for major New York City law firms, and I've spoken to far too many women concerned about their safety commuting to work. For example, there was a 60-year-old woman, secretary from Long Island, who was too scared to walk from Penn Station to the office. I also spoke with an attorney moving from Canada to New York City to work at the firm. She was already going to carry bear spray because she's from Canada, but I also encouraged her to get some mace to ward off potential attackers. Another extreme example is a Ernst & Young executive was pushed in front of the subway train in Times Square and died. Another woman was set on fire last year on the subway train, and it took authorities days to identify her because her body was burned back to death. Another point I want to make is with regard to the taxpayers. Mr. Mamdani campaigned against billionaires and so on. According to Governor Hochul, 1.5%, the top 1.5% of New York City taxpayers pay 48% of the taxes. If they start to leave, which I think many of them have already started to do so, you're going to have less of a tax base, which could lead to a situation like Chicago, when, for example, Ken Collins moved Citadel out of Chicago and moved it to Florida for tax and safety reasons. So those are my concerns going forward. I wish Mr. Mamdani
that's a terrific look. It's a terrific call, Tom. A bit granular for British viewers, but I'm sure nonetheless interesting and fascinating indeed for our American viewers. I think you don't have to worry about these things with Mamdani, because my overwhelming feeling is that Mamdani is a phony. He has as much intention of doing these things as, I compare him to a figure in British Labour history who became briefly famous in the US when Joe Biden was found to have plagiarized him during a presidential run some decades ago. But that man's name was Neil Kinnock. He used to talk all this flowery, far left guff like Mamdani does, but he had no intention whatsoever of actually doing anything about it, of doing any of it. So there's no chance whatsoever that Mamdani is going to defund the New York Police Department. Now, the New York Police Department, with all due respect to New York's finest, has something of a checkered history, particularly if you are from a visible minority standpoint. If you are from a labor trade union standpoint, you won't have had great experiences with the NYPD. But the answer is not to defund it. In other words, to abolish it, not unless you've got some wonderful plan to create an entirely new police force which would come into being instantaneously. And of course, no such thing exists. I don't believe the billionaires will leave New York, and I don't believe that Mamdani will do anything to make them want to leave New York. Having said these disparaging things about him, or encouraging things depending on your political point of view, I will say that I've got to admire a guy who has the balls in the court of the Sultan, in the Oval Office, with Trump right next to him, who's prepared to call what happened in Gaza a genocide. He will always have a soft spot in my heart for that. Tom in New York, many thanks. Now, you can also leave comments on YouTube. Scan the QR code now, leave a comment, and I'll try and read them out. A Bible and a Gun, great name. A Bible and a Gun says Trump is not trustworthy. Zelensky will accept no deal from Trump. Susan Rabi Dunn says Putin said the 38-point plan was only a basis for discussion, that's all. And Moss Patchouli says Zelensky killed 1 million Christians. I wonder why Thump doesn't say anything about that. And Jeremy Drown says, whatever Russia's problems, they are fighting for those of us Americans who hate America, the empire, and miss America, the republic. And Nate Dunning says Putin said they will be taking more cities and possibly not as fast as they would like, but they will be taking them. Let's take a call in England, in South Shields, where Dan wants to talk about the peace plan. Go ahead, Dan.
Evening, George. I just wanted to follow up on a lot of the discussion that you and Glenn Diesen had regarding these Euro clowns and the nonsense they put forward as a counter-peace plan. I want to echo Glenn's last statement that the most dangerous people for the Ukraine are those who pretend to be their friends, and no bigger evidence of that than the pig Boris Johnson, who scuppered the best deal they'll ever get from this war in March 2022 and has been piping up again today to denounce the Trump peace plan as a betrayal. Well, you would say that because I'm led to believe he's making good bank off the contacts he makes with his arms dealers' friends and the people involved in the decisions for the war. And I also want to say that these European politicians, political figures, I hesitate to call them leaders because they're not leaders in any sense, are not only dangerous to the Ukrainian people, they're dangerous to us as well. The belligerence is off the charts at the moment. I don't know if you heard the incoming French defense minister bemoaning the fact that apparently French citizens aren't ready to sacrifice their children for a war with Russia. And this is outrageous, this kind of statement. And because when do you hear any of these ready to make sacrifices to take themselves to the front line, to take their children to the front line? Keir Starmer rented a private penthouse apartment so that his son could revise for his GCSEs without any noise, without any stress. So is he going to send his son to a foreign war to the front line? I don't imagine he is. I think the most dangerous
I'm not sure
around,
he rented it. Dan, I'm not actually sure he paid any rent for it. Powerful points made by Dan in South Shields on the laughable European counter-peace plan. Now, before the break, A big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the MOATS.tv website, MOATS.tv. Mark Bartrip, Paul and Bev Schofield, Kareem Jan, John Dickerson, and Janice Faris. A big, big thanks to each and every one of you for your generosity. Please do become a MOATS donor tonight. It's really simple. Just scan the QR code in the corner of the screen now, or visit our website, moats.tv. Coming up after the break, a good friend of mine, an elected official in the United States of America, Dr. Chrristopher Helali, a researcher, a political analyst and journalist. And boy, has he featured big in the Epstein affair. Well, he's only got the original little black book. Maybe we'll have time to talk about that with him, but we're mainly going to talk about the Trump peace plan and whether or not the war is going to drag on. Stay tuned. Dr. Chrristopher Helali will be up right next. On the line is a legend. It's May in Oklahoma. On you go, May.
I know that when you started out in life, you probably were an outcast. And because of that, you love you love the outcast and you love the downtrodden. When I first started listening to you, you actually said you were embarrassed to have to ask for money. And I told you at that time that you didn't need to be, because you are worth your salt. Now you have MOATS TV, and I hope you have no shame asking for money to support, because I believe you're finally coming into your own and understanding how very, very important you are to many, many people all over the world, millions, I'm sure. And you also ask not only for their support, for their understanding, and you help motivate us to take action. I know you motivate me. And now you're being recognized all over the world. And I want you to remember, on those days when you just feel like you don't know how you can do it anymore, because we all feel that way. We see the pictures, we see the videos, we hear the news reports. You know, we Americans hear about shootings, and we all just despair sometimes. But I want you on those days to remember, number one, how far you've come from your beginnings. And number two, how far you brought other people along with you, because you are bringing other people along with you. And you
that's the most important thing, May. I have to stop you. You're going to make me cry. But the most important thing is the people I'm bringing with me.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
This is heading for a 30,000 poll, actually. Will Zelensky accept the Trump peace plan? Get voting on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, the YouTube stream, or on my Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. Dr. Chris Helali struck lucky, I suppose you'd say, when he spotted on the internet, on eBay, I think, the original black book of Jeffrey Epstein. And now a lot of people want to get their hands on it. It's not the main reason why I've got him here tonight, but I put him on notice. If we've got time, I'd love to hear that story. Dr. Chris Helali, elected official in the United States of America, researcher, political analyst and journalist. I bid you a good evening. You are most welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Let's start with how the 28-point plan has gone down. Amongst the American public, we know the Democrats are completely against it. Some of the Republican Party too. and we know the military-industrial complex and the military and media industrial complex will be hostile to it. Is Trump going to have the balls to stand firm on this, do you think?
Well, first and foremost, a good evening to you, my dear comrade, and to all of our listeners and viewers around the world. First and foremost, I think the apt analogy would be the Mir spacecraft when it was plummeting back to Earth after it had used up its life in outer space. And that's exactly where we're at right now. This Mir or peace proposal is crashing and burning in real time. And we've seen that the 28 proposal, we've seen the European counter proposal, which is 24. We've seen what the Russians are saying. And overall, we've seen a frustrated Trump tonight basically saying the Ukrainians are not grateful and he's going to put additional sanctions on Russia. So I don't quite know what we're to make of this whole situation. I think it was sort of a pie in the sky type scenario again for the US, kind of the delusions that continue and fester amongst some of those elite who want to see this war done. First they said 24 hours, 48 hours, who knows, now it's been months and months, almost a year since Trump took office, and we still don't have a firm commitment on peace in Ukraine, because ultimately what Russia has asked for is the solving and the addressing of the root causes of this conflict, which the peace plan does not necessarily address. And that's something that is ongoing in terms of the negotiations. And of course, Russia has said, if we don't have a negotiated settlement diplomatically, we will of course achieve all the aims of the special military operation on the battlefield.
And General Winter has just arrived on the battlefield. The snows are here, and the Ukrainian armed forces are in a pretty bad shape, aren't they?
Yes, they're in a very bad shape. Actually, we have numerous reports, and I was just near the front line in the Kursk Oblast just some 2.5 weeks ago, and we saw that the Russian armed forces across the line of contact are making enormous advances. And really what we've seen out of the Ukrainians, especially out of the Ukrainian general staff, has been real concern that they're reaching that point. And there comes a point in every war where at some point, one side begins to weaken so much that their opponent begins to just plow through. And that's where the general staff has said we are. We're at the point where there's such a thin spread of Ukrainian soldiers, the inability to get new soldiers, the information just today that the Ukrainian foreign legions are going to be integrated into the assault units, into the storm units. That means that Colombians, French, Americans, British, Italians, whoever's fighting on the Ukrainian side is going to go on the front line, front line, in the trenches, not anymore in the rear to go and play mercenary and war tourist. So that ultimately means that the Ukrainians are in a very difficult position now. And they're having tremendous difficulty recruiting, filling those ranks. And also, this has become a war of drones. So the Russian drone capability has far outweighed, outmaneuvered, and outnumbered the Ukrainian capabilities. And of course, with the shutdown in the US that had happened, with ongoing concerns in Europe and in the US about supplying of weapons, and with a lot of weapons not reaching the front lines. As you might know, I interviewed 11 Ukrainian POWs who wanted to speak with me and were very open and candid and said, we never received any Western weaponry. We received only old Soviet weaponry. So all of these guns, all of these munitions, they're not even necessarily going to the front line. We don't even know where they're going. So that remains an ongoing concern. And I believe that this winter will be a pivotal turning point. If there's no diplomacy, continue to see the line of contact move ever so fast in the direction of Kiev, in the direction of other oblasts. And we're going to see, as the Russians continue to target energy infrastructure to try to pressure the Ukrainians into achieving the aims by military force, that eventually I think the Ukrainian side will have no choice. Either by victory on the battlefield or by negotiated settlement, they're going to have to swallow the poison pill. They're going to have to drink the hemlock on this one.
Our friend Larry Johnson has upped the ante on the gigantic corruption scandal now engulfing the regime in Kiev. Larry, former CIA analyst of high rank, a man of the shadows in his previous career. He has the contacts. He knows where the bodies are buried, even literally. He says that Zelensky has stolen $45 billion. No wonder the Western weapons weren't reaching the front. Things were not even hitting the ground in Ukraine before they were in the back of a Mercedes-Benz and off across the border to God knows where.
You're absolutely right. Not only that, I've spoken also with Larry when we were here together just a few weeks ago, and also with Rick Sanchez. And we have reported billions of dollars of weaponry have come into the border of Ukraine and subsequently left the border of Ukraine to go to places like Syria, like Mali, and other parts and other conflicts where the Ukrainians are basically washing the dirty laundry of the Americans and the Europeans in their hybrid war against Russia, against China, and against other multipolar powers, you could say, or anti-imperialist powers. So we've seen that Ukrainians have armed and trained the Syrian jihadists. We've seen them arm and train jihadists in the Sahel. We've seen them arm and train any group that is antagonistic to Russia or China or other groups. And why? Because Ukraine has effectively become not only a mafia state, not only a rogue state in this way, but it has become the clearinghouse for all of the dirty deeds of the Americans and the Europeans. And I've said that for the past few years. We've had a clear understanding. People have gone and gotten very rich by basically selling substandard military products to the Ukrainians with the American and European taxpayer footing the bill. And that's been documented to the tune of billions of dollars. Now with Mindich and Zelensky and all of their cronies in the inner circle taking percentages of up to 15, 20, 25% per deal, we're talking about billions of dollars. And Larry Johnson might be spot on with that number. Because as we know, and you rightfully pointed it out, and I've given you credit many times, like in Iraq, when they sent pallets of cash that weren't metered or measured or counted, the same has been done in Kiev. They've sent plane loads of cash, and you've seen that in the report. It's not even a conspiracy theory. Mindich, the money that was seized was in basically these plastic sealed, vacuum sealed packages. They came straight from Kansas City, from St. Louis or wherever, and they were on pallets on C-130s or C-17s. That's to show you the level of corruption and depravity. And we've seen the women who are in relationships or being intimate with high political and military leaders in Ukraine living a life of luxury in places like Malta, in places like Monaco, in places where the rich and the elite continue to enjoy the lavish lifestyle that they lead. Of course, they're leading that lavish lifestyle on the dime of the American and European taxpayer. That's the biggest scandal in this. Not only the millions of dead that were unnecessary or wounded, but the fact that this has been the largest money laundering operation that we've seen since the war on terror began with what happened in Iraq. And I believe that this is a major crime and a major story, and more of us will continue to investigate as the months and years continue.
Now, you were a fighter, a former military officer. Can you answer me this? Why would the ordinary Ukrainian soldier continue to fight for a gang like Zelensky's gang? Of course, I respect absolutely any man, woman who are defending their own land, their own country, their families and so on. I respect that whether I'm on their side or I'm not. But if you say to me, keep on fighting, keep on sending your sons to a front line where they will not last long to defend a regime as rotten as any that has ever lived anywhere at any time. Why?
I think that's a huge question. And I think that what you're seeing on your social media, what you're seeing on your television screen, shows that they are not fighting anymore because of love of their country and for patriotism. Because most of them have understood that this war is not a war that is patriotic. It's not a war in defense of their lives. It's in defense of this ruling clique that's in Kiev, that's backed by the West. And when I spoke to Ukrainian POWs, you've seen the videos. All of the people on the front line now have been, for the most part, forcibly mobilized, captured in their underpants, captured taking their kids to school, captured going to the supermarket to buy milk for their young babies, captured on the way to take care of their granny in the nursing home. They have been stolen from the streets, even from their jobs, plucked from their jobs and thrown into military training. And when I spoke to those Ukrainian POWs, two of them said one was sent to France and one was sent to the United Kingdom. This is a big story that's coming up. Two of them were sent through Poland to get training in France and the UK. The training lasted 35 days, and when they came back across the border, they were sent directly to the trenches. Imagine that, 35 days from a civilian life to the frontline trenches of one of the biggest military conflicts in our world today. And you know what they did? They said, when we saw the Russians, we threw down our weapons and we went straight to them. Because they said it was sure death. Nobody's going to survive that front line for very long. So they went to the front line, they went to the Russian side, and what they found was shocking. The Russians gave them food, water, medical aid, and allowed them to contact their families. When they contacted their families, the Ukrainians' intelligence went to those family members and said, do not communicate anymore with your relative. That's the level where we're at in this conflict right now, where people who don't agree with the government are being forcibly mobilized by the tens of thousands, sent into the meat grinder to defend this clique that is embezzling billions of dollars and sending young lives and even older lives. There were plenty of guys with gray hair there that were POWs. And they said it was a horror show. No training, no real gear, and it was just basically go. And you know, I want to reveal to your listeners how depraved this Ukrainian regime is. When they went to the front line, before they even were sent into battle, their families had already received missing person notices. Why? Because in Ukraine, the Ukrainian government doesn't have to pay the family if they're missing. That's the level of corruption. They even won't pay for their own dead, and they embezzle and steal that money that belongs to the family of those who die or are captured in the war. Just to show you the level of corruption that we're dealing with here. And it comes straight from the sources that I've been able to speak with throughout this special military operation. And it has been an unbelievable window into the fraud and the gangsterism that goes on the Ukrainian side in this conflict.
What's your best guess on what's going to happen now? The Europeans, as you say, have mounted a counter-peace offensive. Their peace proposals, 24 points, are perfectly laughable. Even the 28 points of Trump would not have solved the problem. Shrink that down to 24 points and begin to ship some of the European text into an American text, and you've got a non-starter. That's how it looks to me. I think we'll still be, God willing, having this conversation next Thanksgiving, never mind this one. What say you?
I agree with you. I agree 100%. Basically, we have a situation where the Russians are saying, okay, we are open to dialogue and we're open to peace, but peace on our terms. Because we didn't start this conflict, right? We didn't do the Euromaidan coup. We didn't bomb civilians in Donbass from 2014 to 2022. And we didn't give so much blood and treasure and sacrifice so much as a nation to then become humiliated at the negotiating table. This is not going to be a victory for Donald Trump and the Europeans. This will be a victory for the Russian people, ultimately. And for the peace-loving people of Ukraine, who didn't want this to begin with, who were totally okay with speaking Russian, with the church, with celebrating May 9th, and with celebrating their great heritage, right? As part of the greater Russian world, Russian civilization, of which Ukraine has been a part of since the beginning. So I think that we definitely will be having this conversation, because if the Americans and the Europeans are continuing on their course, they do not want to address the root causes. And speaking about conditions of the Ukrainian army, keeping them at 600,000, talking about the seizing of Russian assets to the tune of $100 billion, I don't think that we're going to see any peace agreement anytime soon. Until the Americans and the Europeans won't do it, because the Europeans will lose their power. They've built up their whole power and reputation on Russophobia. Trump, not as much. But at this point, like you said, there are so many vested interests, military, industrial, economic, and political interests at play. They don't want to let this go too easy. And they want to continue this because it's good for business. Why not? Who's to stop them? Who's going to stop Ursula von der Leyen? Who's going to stop Merz and Macron? They're going to continue. And they're going to continue to give their people's money and continue to buy American weaponry. And America can wash its hands like Pontius Pilate and say, we're actually not arming, but they are arming through Europeans, the Ukrainian regime.
Now, just in the few minutes left to us, I hadn't quite grasped the importance, though you had actually mentioned it to me, of your extraordinary find on eBay. Tell us about it and tell us what happens with it next.
Sure. Like you and many others, I enjoy, of course, doing research. I enjoy, combing the internet for all sorts of little snippets of information, trying to piece together the puzzle that is, I think, the world that we live in, and especially the intelligence networks and all of the deep, dark secrets. And as I was doing that, looking for the first book that was published by Nick Bryan via Gawker, I stumbled upon this eBay listing from a woman in San Francisco who said that she was in the 90s, some sort of like musician hanging around New York. She was on Fifth Avenue. She saw a guy get in a limousine, dropped the book. She picked up the book. She looked inside some big famous names. She didn't know who Jeffrey Epstein was, but she put it and she kept it. And a decade later, when the Epstein stuff came to light, she tried to start, selling it and giving it away and telling people this is very important. She contacted the New York Times, Washington Post. Nobody would touch it. She put it on eBay. She needed new tires. I told her, listen, I'll take a risk. I won't pay $500. I'll pay $400 plus $25 express shipping, because my wife at the time would have killed me, would have hung me out to dry if, I spent all this money on a forgery. But I took the risk because her story sounded so plausible. I said it couldn't be fabricated. And when I got the book and I opened it up, because I have worked in archives and I'm a historian by trade, I knew it was real. I instantly called the people that I knew. Nick Bryan, contacted Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald, who was the Pulitzer Prize winner, who won the whole thing about the Epstein case. And they all told me who to go to, who to contact. We authenticated the book through forensic analysis. And then we were able to start to track down the people in the book. And there are big names, over 200 people we didn't know were connected to the Epstein world. And I'm still doing investigation on one such person who I think is going to be a bombshell when it goes live about what's going on in that circle, in that elite circle, even around President Trump to date. But the most important thing is that I just received word from Congress, from the great council of the House of Representatives, of which Thomas Massie is leading an enormous crusade along with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I have provided the book, a copy of the book to them, plus my deposition and all information, so I can continue to shed light on this network. Maybe we won't get the full story, but I hope that many of us will continue to delve deep, because you and I both know that there's a lot more to this story than just what we know on the surface. And the connections and the links are world important and world shattering once they are exposed, if we can get there.
Amen to that. Dr. Chrristopher Helali, my dear and good friend, thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. We'll have Chris back when that big bombshell drops, I promise you. Let's take a break, and then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri. And the first call is Guido from Greece, and then Rush in Pennsylvania. Stay tuned. Let's go to our old friend Declan in Dublin, who's online too. Go ahead, Declan.
Right, George. There's a very big protest in the town of Taybeh, the last Christian village on the West Bank. If they lose this, they are finished in the Holy Land. I'd like to take the chance to salute Francesca Albanese, who is the greatest woman, I think, of our generation. And the hope is that there are other Francesca Albaneses out there who will do something, because the Western churches, the Catholic Church especially, and the other main churches are doing absolutely nothing for their co-religionists in the Holy Land, just like they did nothing for them in Syria or in Iraq.
They don't even talk about them, never mind do anything. And all these Christian politicians, and all these Christian leaders, and most of the Christian clergy haven't done or said even jack to come to their aid. They're not Christians, most of these politicians. When they say they're Christians, better count your spoons, or better still, count the burning Christian houses.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You've got 10 minutes still to vote. Will Zelensky accept the Trump peace plan? Get your vote in now. And let's go to Greece. Who wouldn't? Where Guido has a point of view on Trump and Netanyahu. Go ahead, Guido.
Hey, George. So we know that Trump and Netanyahu are both followers of Chabad Lubavitch movement, which believe in the necessity of hastening the arrival of the prophesied Messiah. So could it be possible that all the anti-Zionist rhetoric we see on the internet is actually being encouraged in order to fulfill the prophecy where Zechariah 12:3 states, on that day when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all nations? It's
just mindless. It's mindless obscurantism masquerading as prophecy. And these words were written by men. They were not written by God. And moreover, they were written with a purpose. And that purpose has been reinterpreted by the Schofield Bible in 1905 to distort and twist even the words of the men who wrote these extraordinarily dense and prolix texts. And as I say, it's for me obscurantism. The idea that in 2025 grown, educated men and women are still retailing this guff as a reason for supporting Israel in the slaughter of little babies in the here and now. What kind of Christianity is that, for God's sake? Now, the podcast. We're in the top 10 in Nigeria. Oh dear. After my unkind comments about Chief You-Know-Me Goodman, who used to offer me millions on a weekly basis, if only I'd given my bank account details. We're in the top 10 in Nigeria, in Peru, in Ghana, and in Iraq for politics this week. I'm so happy to hear that. We have so many friends in all 4 of these countries, and we're now in the top 10. We're in the top 20 in Botswana, Indonesia, and the UAE. You can download the MOATS podcast simply by scanning that QR code on your screen now. Let's go to Rush in Pennsylvania on the Professor Glenn Diesen interview. Go ahead, Rush.
Yes, George Galloway, I've called you, I think, 2 other times. And the last time I called you, I don't know what we were talking about, and then you said, well, I got somebody on next, the judge. He might be able to answer that. And you had Napolitano on, and that's the only guy I listen to over here other than you. And I thought, wow,
He's
isn't
brilliant,
that something? But, okay, well, I have a grandson in Norway. Now, I live in Pennsylvania. His mother was a foreign exchange student, and he was born at Paris Island. My son, his father, was a Marine, and he wants to become a Marine, and there ain't no way that's happening if I have anything to do with it. Now, I might be jumping around here, George, if you bear with me. The way I hooked up with you had an interview with a Senate interview with Senator Coleman and Levin, and I just watched it again the other day. I mean, that was unbelievable. If nobody's seen that, they got to watch that. You just shredded them to pieces. Now, with the last caller there, if you're going to talk about Trump against Putin, if Trump knows anything about the Bible, he probably put himself in it, for one thing. Putin, I think Russia might be
I'm waiting for that. Mount Rushmore is the least of his ambitions. He wants to be in the Bible.
Hey, George, Russia may be more of a Christian nation we are. Nobody believes that. Because now you have that Huckabee, our ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, and he was over there. He met with Pollard. We had this guy that was a traitor, Navy guy, put 30 years in prison, I guess, and then Netanyahu welcomed him over there, and this and that and the other. So Mike Huckabee, I used to watch it. He used to have a show on here on Saturday night and play some music and this, that. But he's over there bowing down to them big time, waiting for the rapture. But I got to tell you something, George. Last week, you opened up your show. Because I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler fan. I don't know if you know anything about football. Over here, it's football, not soccer. But and I got the Steelers. I record them because I got to listen to you. And you made a comment last week, which I had heard, about Trump and Clinton. And I was telling my friends, and they said, "Whoa, man, you're off the charts." Well, I have to tell you, there's a few of our nightly talk show hosts, the guys, which I don't listen to or whatever, but I happened to see that they had made comments about that too. If you know what I'm referring to there, but
I do. Yeah, the question was, did Putin have the photos of Trump blowing Bubba? Now, naturally, we all assumed that the Bubba in question was Bill Clinton, but it turned out even more remarkable. The Bubba that Putin might have photos of Trump blowing was Ghislaine Maxwell's horse. I'm going to draw a veil rush over the rest of these proceedings. The imagery is too extreme. Thanks for the call, mate. Brilliant call. Karaoke Star says, I wonder how much of all these billions Zelensky has pocketed that has gone on his mate Charlie and right up his hooter with his mates Macron and Starmer on a train. Clara Lochin says, my take on the Ukraine peace plan is that Trump offered Putin everything he wanted if he and China abstained from the Gaza UN vote. And Nate Dunning says, Gigi, do you remember Minsk 1 and Minsk 2? They seemed like good deals too. Good point. Dejuma Boutique says, friends of Ukraine were also friends of Iraqis, friends of Syrians, friends of Libyans, etc. And Chris 77333 says, I've seen those IDF and Jewish women popping up on my feed. It's obvious they were a plant from day one. Timing a little off, guys. Let's go to New York, where Dennis wants to have a fight regarding Donald Trump. Come and have a go, Dennis, if you think you're hard enough.
Oh, well, thank you for that introduction, George. Yeah, I don't know that it's a fight. I would characterize it a little differently. I encourage people who I discuss with to, engage in any kind of constructive criticism if they think that I need it or deserve it. And I hope that you feel the same way. That's what this conversation for me is about, is constructive criticism. It's not antagonism or certainly not a fight. But I did mention to the lady who I spoke with earlier on the phone that it's been a while since we've spoken, and reminded her that the first time we spoke was almost a year ago when there was, when just before Trump's inauguration, the announcement that there was a Palestinian peace plan that had been put in place. And I, during that conversation with you, expressed my skepticism about anything that might, any good that might come of that. And I was chastised for being a pessimist and a defeatist by you. And subsequent to that, on several other occasions, I had a similar experience with you, and I expressed skepticism about any of Donald Trump's peace initiatives. And so the reason I called today is because we find ourselves here again, engaging in rational discourse about a supposed peace plan, and my opinion and feelings are still the same, and that is I don't know how long we can delude ourselves and continue to engage in rational discourse about anything that a pathological, malignant narcissist says or does, and to think that anything good can ever come of anything that Donald Trump suggests or engages in, or any of his entourage. And I do have one suggestion, and then I'll let you respond. That is, I'm a little surprised and would encourage you. I'm surprised that you have not yet had Andrei Martyanov on your show as a guest, or at least not that I know of. And I can't think of a single thing that would be more helpful, beneficial, productive in a conversation like this for your listeners and for our collective well-being.
Just on that point, Dennis, on that point, I'm not familiar with the name that you mentioned. Just tell us who the person is, will you?
Andrei Martyanov, and he is widely known and recognized as the singular and solitary expert in the West on Russian military affairs. That's why I'm surprised that you don't know his name. So you might want to check him out.
I don't know him, no.
Well, check him out, and
I will do,
and maybe make an effort to contact him and interview him, and then see if you think it's appropriate to have him on your show. I think it would be very beneficial.
I've now got him. Clarity Press, Andrei Martyanov. I'll definitely check that out. Dennis, full marks to you for your dogged persistence and your quiet and dignified insistence that you were right and I was wrong. I don't actually recall the clash that we had, but I would have to say that you are being proven right, and I am being proven to have hoped for things that have not transpired. Because I said all along, I repeated it 100 times, that the big enchilada, World War III, an intensification of American involvement in the Ukraine war, was more likely to happen under the Democrats, under President Kamala Harris, than under a renewed President Trump. And I'll go to the stake defending that position. But as a result of all the other disasters that he has presided over, one of them, the Israel-Palestine one, in which your predictions have been borne out, the weakness of Trump's position is now such that he might not even be able to avoid World War III breaking out in Ukraine. In other words, I was not happy that Donald Trump was the president, but I was very happy that Kamala Harris was not. And as they were the last top two on the ballot paper, that effectively meant I would rather have Trump than Harris. And I'm not yet actually ready to rescind that analysis. I don't yet believe that Kamala Harris would have been less bad than Donald Trump. I knew that he would be bad for the Middle East, not just Israel-Palestine, but also on the Iranian track. I knew that he would be worse in Latin America, but I made the calculation that avoiding the world war, which was then threatening and potentially imminent in the Ukraine, was a more important issue. The most important issue. I'm still not ready to let go of that possibility, but it's getting late. I'm waiting on the last train here. So the next time you call me, you might well get an absolutely affirmative answer that you were right and I was wrong. Dennis, keep listening, keep watching, and a great call. Ryan, my good friend in Utah, wants to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let's hear from a Scotsman in Utah. Go ahead, Ryan.
How you doing, George? Hail, hail, and congratulations on Scotland getting to the World Cup. Eh? What a week we've had.
Wow. What a week. Scotland, Ireland in the playoffs. Unbelievable.
I know, brilliant. Brilliant. It's a sign of the times that we've made a World Cup. But I'd like to just pick your brain on what your thoughts are on Thomas Massey and those that are leading the march for the Epstein files to be released, and also on the resignation on Marjorie Taylor Greene, what your thoughts are on that, and if, you think that America should have a separate party from now on, because it seems like the Republicans and the Democrats are working for the same, dark arts or whatever they're doing on that side of the pond, but it seems, there's some left in their politics that have some common sense and they want to fight for the truth. So how can America save those that are trying to fight for the truth, and where do we go from here? And hail, hail.
Well, a brilliant call, Ryan, as always. I think America needs a lot of new parties. It needs a workers' party, a people's party for the working class, but it also needs a new set of capitalist parties, because the Republicans and the Democrats, two sides of the same coin, two cheeks of the same arse, as we'd say in Glasgow, they are not fit for purpose. They are bought and paid for, totally corrupted, utterly incompetent, and thoroughly malignant and venal. So the Democrats and the Republicans might as well merge, just like Labour and the Conservatives here in Britain. They might as well merge, just like the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats in Germany might as well merge, because they stand for the same thing, and moreover, it's a same thing that is visibly and spectacularly failing to deliver the goods for their own people. So I'm interested in Musk's idea of an America party. I note that Alex Jones has reached breaking point with Trump. Bannon often seems as if he too has reached breaking point with Trump. Mr. Carlson, Tucker Carlson, I very much hope that he goes into politics. I think he would be the best presidential candidate since Jack Kennedy, whose death anniversary we commemorated yesterday. So there are a lot of new political forces that will need to be born in the United States. A duopoly, a kind of uni-party, is no good to anyone, especially when the uni-party, both arses, are up the wrong tree. They are leading their countries to disaster. I never thought I'd like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't share her politics, of course, but I think that she's a game old bird. I think that she has shown enormous courage and fortitude in standing up to one of the most extraordinary witch hunts I have ever seen. As I pointed out recently, Marjorie Taylor Greene was out there on her own defending Trump when they stole the election from him in 2020, when they were trying in multiple courtrooms to put him in prison behind bars for the rest of his life. Marjorie Taylor Greene was that blonde woman who was standing outside the court, who was a loyal supporter of Donald Trump. And look how he's turned on her. And the way that he's turned on her is increasingly convincing me that he's not all there, that he's in cognitive decline. We may be witnessing, and in a different form, another Joe Biden here. Because how else do you explain a guy so viciously turning on a woman who has been totally loyal to him because she merely insisted that he carried out the promises that he'd made to her and to the American people? Ditto Thomas Massey, who seems a genuinely first-rate congressman. Again, different politics to me. I wouldn't myself be voting for him ordinarily. But Massey and Greene are loyal supporters of the idea of America first, of make America great again. Isn't that what the whole show was meant to be about? Big thanks, Ryan. Hail, hail. Charlie's in North Wales on Peter Mandelson. I'm always interested in his doings. Charlie, go ahead.
Great show as normal, George. Good to speak to you. And I particularly liked your monologue last week, which this probably links into pretty well with the Epstein files. I'm going to have to watch my words very carefully rather than go on a rant of expletives. But the slime ball that is Peter Mandelson, it's gone all very quiet. Why is he drawing £174,000 still on the Foreign Office payroll, for one? Secondly, he's on a leave of absence from the House of Lords, but that doesn't preclude him from drawing his expenses. And why hasn't he been stripped of his peerage? He's gone back to his consultancy company, Global Counsel. And to top it all, and this really does top it all, and it shows what an utter scumbag the man is, and the calibre of people we have in politics at the top at the moment. He was caught urinating up against George Osborne's house wall after he had dinner with him last week. And then he apologised, saying, well, he got caught short because he was waiting for an Uber. Well, normal human beings would have just knocked on the door and said, could I come in and use your loo? I mean, it just sums up the man in its entirety, really. And if we've got Andrew being stripped of his titles, why has Peter Mandelson still got a peerage? I just
well, I can, if I stop you there, I can confidently say, with my deep knowledge of the Defamation Acts, that you have not committed any act of defamation in that statement, which was certainly not a rant and was very well delivered and well forensically aimed, unlike Peter Mandelson's maturation up the side of somebody's house after being caught short. There's a number of strange things about that story. The first is the idea that Peter Mandelson goes anywhere in an Uber. Peter Mandelson is a multi-millionaire. He's a member of the House of Lords. He was a cabinet minister in Tony Blair and Gordon Brown's government. He is one of the best known and most hated political figures in the United Kingdom. And the idea that he stands in the street waiting for an Uber is exceedingly unlikely to me. He's a former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and therefore has a constant, lifelong police protection. And the whole thing just, if you forgive the pun, smells rather fishy to me. As to his salary, well, he was an ambassador. He did not commit any act of gross character that could warrant his actual dismissal from his job, because they already knew about all of his relations with Jeffrey Epstein before they gave him the job. So they could not now sack him from the job because at an employment tribunal, if you could get your head round that one, Peter Mandelson would win, would drive a coach and horses through their case, because there was no new material. Everything that he had done with Epstein was known to the security services, therefore to the Foreign Office, and therefore to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister gave him that job, knowing that he was deeply embedded, shall I say, with the Epstein affair. So they could move him, but they could not sack him, and therefore he's still on the payroll at the Foreign Office. I don't believe in the House of Lords, but I think the House of Lords deserves Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson is an emblem of the House of Lords. He is emblematic of the putrefying corpse that is British democracy, starting at the House of Lords and increasingly working its way down. Charlie, a great call, mate. There's a legend on the line. It's Erobos in New York on the Trump administration. Welcome, Erobos. Have we lost Erobos? It seems we have. Erobos. Yeah, you're on the air, brother.
As I was saying, salutations. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, brother, you're on the air.
You.
Hey, we're having trouble.
Can
tonight.
you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yeah, it seems we have a bad connection. Okay, well, I was saying, like I was saying, you know, I have it's Wi-Fi issues, but salutations.
We've lost him. We're going to need to get him a phone because we need his calls. We need his calls. We miss him when he's not there. Thank you, brother. Go ahead. You're on the air again.
Did you get all that? Yeah,
yes,
I
brother.
have a bad connection.
Yeah, deeply appreciated. Maybe best come straight to your point. No, that's not going to work. Look, I'm closing the poll now. Will Zelensky accept the Trump peace plan? Yes or no? Well, on Telegram, 27% said yes. But on X, 32%, nearly a third, said yes. On the YouTube community poll, 26%. The YouTube stream, 30%. But on Patreon, 50% of the creme de la creme, the vanguard, the purest of the pure, 50% say that Zelensky will accept the Trump peace plan. I myself think it's a bit of a false dichotomy, that he will neither accept it nor reject it, or rather he will say that he accepts it but work to undermine and ultimately reject it. This man is hanging on by his fingernails to power and to dear life, because out of power, the chances of continuing with his dear life, now a very much richer one than when he started, is very, very limited indeed. Now, I am calling a halt to the poll. 29,000 people voted in it, didn't quite get to the 30,000, but thanks to all those who voted. And a big shout out now to tonight's top donors who've been on to MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Nigel Ellis Brown, Yosri Uni, William Fitch, Ian McCavney, and Elaine Ryan. A big thank you to all of you, the big donors and small. Just go to MOATS.tv website. Click on the Donate Now button and you can help this show to stay alive. I'm just waiting for my good wife, Gayatri, to join me. Here she is with the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, we are indeed this week commemorating the assassination on President John F. Kennedy, 22nd of November 1963, Dallas, Texas, Dealey Plaza. Just taking my mic. There you go. There you go. That should be my mic on. I was talking about President John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1963.
Yesterday, wasn't it?
Yes, 22nd of November 1963 in Dallas, Texas. Now,
America itself was murdered on that day.
It was, yes, that's for sure. Everything changed after that. And there are not many people who believe the official stories today, but Lee Harvey Oswald is, of course, the named killer in all the history books. But I had not quite grasped that only 2 days after, when he was arrested on the Dealey Plaza, a nightclub owner, Jack Ruby, just killed him right there and then live on TV.
Meaning, it live.
Yes, exactly.
I saw it happening live on television.
So that's it, just in case he speaks too much as well in prison. It's incredible. So, John F. Kennedy assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson sworn in. And I want to turn to him because 5 presidents oversaw the Vietnam War, but of course LBJ was known to have aggravated all of it.
He escalated it the most, yeah.
Yes, I mean, starting with his Gulf of Tonkin resolution, it was an alleged attack by North Vietnam on the U.S. forces, exactly. But that allowed him to basically have free reign over the Vietnam without congressional approval. And so he went all forces, all guns blazing.
He did that to those little children.
Yes,
and
there we are.
Many little children that look just like our little children.
Yeah, and I am just raising this because we, of course, chose to rewatch the classic Good Morning Vietnam, which brought to us so much laughter and so much pain at the same time. For me to see pictures, as you say, of children and people, uncles and aunties, could have been mine. There he is. I mean, the brilliance of Robin Williams is unmatched. If you haven't seen it for a while, go have a look at it.
Watch it again. Yeah.
Watch it again to our audience at home. And then the conclusion overall is, of course, that it is a happy ending because we know it ended well. Vietnam won under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh, but not before the presidents of America sent 558
far more. There was 58,000
that
dead
were killed.
Americans.
Yes, that returned in boxes. Sorry, so 3 million was. I had my numbers wrong.
People who who spent time in Vietnam would be in millions, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And it went up from a small number of advisors to hundreds of thousands, 58,000 of whom were killed, hundreds of thousands of whom were wounded in their heads or in their bodies.
Yes. And so we are now comparing on two fronts the Vietnam War with the world today, how the US has just not learned from its past. It just keeps going with its wars, imperialist wars around the world, whether it be through the military bases, whether it be through a bit of democracy over here or a bit of what have you,
regime
change over there. And then, of course, the devastating massacre and genocide that we're witnessing in Palestine. Imagine if we had that technology back then during the Vietnam War. I mean, the impact of the Vietnam War was so great, and we have now gone through 2 years of the genocide in Palestine, watching it on our phones' lives. It's just a thought of comparison.
Yeah,
in that
some
sense.
things never change.
No. Now, people have not, people are still very loud and clear about Palestine, and you may not see or hear enough on the outside your street of it, but this weekend, for example, in London was yet another protest outside the Ministry of Justice, and there has been a specific law in the UK, as you know, in which a certain group has been banned. And ever since, there have been 2,000 people arrested.
2,500 nearly.
Yeah. So this weekend alone, there were 90
terrorism charges.
On terrorism charge. 90 people alone were arrested for the demonstrations in London this week. Now, I say people, but this weekend for the first time, they've also arrested a mannequin. I kid you not. In London today, they arrested, the Metropolitan Police arrested a mannequin who held up a placard in support of the group that supports, it's against genocide.
Wow.
Yes.
So there's the mannequin getting put in the van.
There's the mannequin being put in the van. And the girl with the pink hair, she said that the mannequin is her girlfriend. And why would you not believe her in the time and age in which...
Well, you're allowed to identify as what you like.
As what you like. So why are we not to believe her?
Identify as a mannequin's girlfriend.
Exactly. There you go. So...
Amazing. Well, look, we're running out of time unless you've got anything pressing to...
pressing not. We'll return to it
we'll
on
leave it because
Wednesday
is going to be a very, very big show.
Yeah.
We've got Scott Ritter because it's the eve of Thanksgiving.
It's going to be the eve of Thanksgiving.
It's
Thanksgiving
the eve
to someone.
of the deadline that Trump has given to Zelensky. We've got Scott Ritter and
chaybowes.
The one and only chaybowes, our dear friend, Irishman in Moscow. So we'll get the perspectives from a great American soldier and intelligence officer and arms inspector and an Irishman in Moscow who knows just about everything that's going on in Moscow and, for that matter, in the Ukraine. Meanwhile, if we can get out of here in the next 5 minutes, I'll take it for chips, as I like to say. So, Gayatri and I will see you, God willing, on Wednesday for the mother of all talk shows. Thanks for watching.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Get him, George.